Okay, let's speak to our guest this evening. This is the Growth Commission, the Growth Commission's chairman, Shanker Singham, who joins us. Now, the Growth Commission have released a report urging the government to take immediate action on a number of fronts so the UK doesn't continue to stagnate economically. These are ideas and suggestions, but we thought it would be quite a nice idea to bring them into this forum and discuss them. Let's say good evening then to Shanker Singham. Good evening to you.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening to you.
So you've published your briefing today, your proposals for Rachel Reeves's urgent consideration. And you've asked us to bear in mind, of course, we've got a growth crisis. Figures tell us that we are... growth is around 1.2% weaker than it was in October. Consumer prices, of course, are higher, a little bit higher. We've got a fiscal crisis and an exports crisis. We need to bear in mind that there could be a potential, if there's no US trade deal, then we could be hit on that front as well. Why come forward with this, first of all?
Well, the Growth Commission's been doing quite a lot of work on, we've got a number of international economists in our ranks, 5 from the US, 2 from Japan, India, Mexico, and a few from the UK. So our focus is looking at G7 countries and lack of growth in the G7. So we've done a few things in the UK. We've looked at three budgets actually now, two Conservative budgets and one Labour budget. And we would typically make a statement like this before any kind of fiscal statement that the Chancellor is about to make. So we submitted a fairly long report into the autumn budget. And what we've submitted today is a shorter sort of statement.
So what are the highlights of what you would like Rachel Reeves to announce?
Well, I think the challenge, and the reason we've done it in this way, because we normally look at sort of 20-year projections of GDP per capita growth, and Michael, you're quite right to talk about per capita, because that is the number that actually affects people. And you're right that while we've had since June of last year a reduction in GDP of about, it's essentially stayed stagnant. The GDP per capita numbers are down because of that increase in population. We're adding about 1 million people a year. So the highlights of the report are basically, we are in 3 crises that we've talked about: growth, fiscal, and exports, and therefore urgent emergency measures we think need to be taken. So with respect to public spending, we think the government's actions, things like eliminating some of the independent bodies like the payment systems regulator, for example. I mean, these are good steps forward that we recommend, but they're not enough. And I think when you talk about public sector cuts amounting to about 5 billion, that is nowhere near enough that you need to really get to.
So come on then, what would you do to make for the big sums of money?
So I think the focus has got to be on increasing that GDP per capita number, and you can do that in a number of ways. So we've suggested, and these are emergency measures that we're suggesting. We're conscious these are big things. Planning reform, for example, again, does not go far enough. We think you need to actually repeal the Town and Country Planning Act. The limited reforms do not really tackle the big challenges of statutory consultees. So, for example, the environmental and heritage provisions have been largely left untouched. But those are the things that stop people building. Planning reform is a big deal. We think on tax, we are going to need to lower the corporate income tax down to 21%, which is what the US is going to move its corporate income tax rate to. There is a lot of movement of global capital and supply chains, partly because of the tariff situation that the Trump administration has teed up. So you've got to make your economy as competitive as possible and as attractive as possible to those supply chains. We've even recommended going down it by 2035 to 15% on the tax side of things.
But is that really going to produce serious growth, whilst at the same time reducing radically the government's receipts.
Yeah, not by itself, and it's really important to understand that these are recommendations that go together. You can't just pull a few things out and say we'll do these things. You have to do the whole thing. We think that regulatory reform is absolutely critical. We would recommend going back to the Competition and Markets Authority report on energy and on transportation. We don't think nationalising the rail service is a good idea. We don't think that Great British Energy is a particularly good idea either, because those large national government-owned entities will tend to crowd out private sector investment. We also think that they need to not go forward with the employment rights bill. That is going to make the UK labour market considerably less flexible. We already have a minimum wage that is 2/3 of median income. It's much higher than our OECD competitors. And then the big elephant in the room, of course, is how are they going to react to the Trump tariff when it comes on April the 2nd? All of the G20 countries are going to get a tariff of some kind. It's going to be calibrated. But if you want to know which countries are in for high tariffs, you only have to look at the 2025 US trade strategy, which sort of outlines all of the barriers that the Trump administration is going to use to determine what that tariff is going to be. And
how badly do you think we'll be hit by that? Because, of course, he's very concerned about VAT, very concerned about the digital sales tax, and would like us to abolish both of those.
Yes,
in terms
yeah.
But is that realistic? And that would, of course, then again reduce government receipts, quite apart from everything else.
So those are the headline issues that he sort of talked about. But actually, if you look underneath at the actual issues that are being raised by US business in the context of this study that is being done right now as we speak by USTR that will land on the president's desk on April the 2nd. Most of it is about regulatory issues. Most of it is regulatory barriers, those types of things. And I think that the UK will have, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 issues that will be put on the table. And I think we have to make a good faith effort at looking at a large number of them. You don't have to solve everything.
But aren't regulatory issues where we went wrong before with the financial crash and later on with Grenfell?
Well, I mean, these are the kinds of issues they are raising are regulatory barriers that are used to protect other countries' markets and the trading partners of the US. So they're very, very concerned, for example, about agricultural regulation in Europe, which we ported over under the rules that were applied when we left the EU. But that's why it's incredibly important that we look at the EU reset in the context of being able to respond to
we have
the
heard
tariff.
from Rachel Reeves about ripping up the red tape. We know that she thinks that it's a good idea to deregulate in order to get things going quicker to promote growth. But none of what you've mentioned so far with respect is going to, in the immediate, plug that £15 billion hole that Rachel Reeves needs to fill. You've also proposed things like unfreezing income tax allowances, ending punitive marginal rates on those earning more than £100,000 as tax allowances are phased out. Now, that is incredibly costly, and there are no plans for Rachel Reeves to do that. So I think while some of your plans are ambitious and exciting, none of it really addresses the immediate issue in front of Rachel Reeves. She began her term, she began her remit with exciting plans for growth, pinning her hopes on growth in order to raise enough money to be able to do other things. That was why Labour was so confident, perhaps made the mistake of not raising taxes, which they've had to do for businesses, of course, after coming into power. I don't think any of what you're presenting to me gives me enough confidence that if you had that £15 billion to find, as Rachel Reeves does, you've got the mechanics in place to be able to do that. I mean, if I set you that challenge now, where would that £15 billion come from? About
Yeah,
£5 billion to level the books, to just balance the books, and then an extra £10 billion she needs in headroom, a safety net.
Yeah. So to be honest, it's that kind of zero-sum thinking that's got us into the mess that we're in. And actually, it's that thinking.
She did try another way, though, didn't she?
I'm talking about the last 25 years of this. I mean, this is both parties have equal blame for this. A colleague of mine was the head of the Office of Management and Budget in the US, and regularly points out that, you know, a little bit extra growth, seas of red ink get washed away, and we tend to focus on these OBR numbers as if they're sort of gospel truth, and chancellors make the mistake, I think, of taking their eye off the main thing that you're trying to accomplish. They've had 6 months, okay, to do this. You have to start somewhere. And you have to send signals to the global marketplace that you are actually embracing an open and growing economy, and that you are creating the conditions in the market that are going to attract capital and investment. And you can't simply continue to say that the OBR has set a certain number, which changes, by the way, on a pretty regular basis. You have to focus on what's actually going to generate economic growth into the UK. And you have to have a long-term plan. You can't have a response to what the OBR is saying every 6 months or so. You've got to have a plan.
Thank you for being with us. That is Chairman of the Growth Commission, Shanker Singham. Thanks for being with us. It's Kait Borsay, Michael Crick